Welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another pro revenge Reddit video. Don't want to let me tinker? Alright then, let's do business. My grandpa was a successful man. In his mid-60s, he decided he wanted to take a step back, so he started selling off his businesses. He sold his various businesses and spent the next few years traveling. Even as a successful businessman, my grandpa always had compassion. He did a lot of things throughout his life for the benefit of others. He once told me he believed in karma and what goes around comes around. So if he helps someone out, even if that person can never repay him, one day, some way, he will get repaid. As my grandpa approached 70, he got bored. In addition, he had a few new grandchildren, so he needed a bigger house. He sold the old home that he had bought after he got back from Vietnam and bought this massive house on this large piece of land. This property also came with a massive steel barn that looked like this. Not sure if he had ever told anyone about his plans, but right after he got the property, he dumped a ton of money into tools and equipment and converted his barn into a mechanic's dream. Here are some things I remember him having. He had a professional lift capable of lifting full-size trucks. He had those professional oil catchers you see at Quick Lubes. He had a dedicated air compressor system that was designed to power all of his power tools. He had a tire machine to mount new tires. He had so much equipment. His tool corner was a massive corner of this massive barn. His plan? To fix cars, especially for people in need. He lived in a rural community. If he didn't have a car, that was a big problem. So he let everyone know at his local church that he was willing to work on their cars if they provided the parts. He only took a few jobs a week. He was doing this to enjoy himself and help those that needed it. He'd of course change oil, change the transmission fluid, and all kinds of various repairs. My grandpa was a talented mechanic. However, he kept the amount of work limited. He was also selective. If you were in need, he'd want to fix your cars. If you had the means to pay, he'd decline and ask you to go elsewhere. One day, the owner of the local car dealership came by and told my grandpa he needed to stop fixing other people's cars because he wasn't properly licensed. He didn't have the proper insurances, and he was hurting his business. My grandpa explained this was just his hobby. He only does a few cars a week. The owner told him he needs to cut it out or he's going to sue my grandpa out of business. My grandpa said he laughed over this. What business was this guy going to sue him out of? The owner walked out. A little while later, my grandpa got served. He was being sued by the owner of the car dealership. My grandpa thought he'd take a trip down to the dealership and try and reason with the man. My grandpa hoped he could come to an understanding. My grandpa spoke to the owner and basically explained he only works on people's cars who are down on their luck. The fact is, the people's cars he fixes probably couldn't afford to pay a professional dealership to fix their vehicle. He only does a few cars a week. He's not all that interested in getting into a fight over his hobby, but he ain't gonna back down. Well, they ended up in court. By this point, my grandpa had hired a lawyer who was able to get the city to approve a commercial garage on his property. It helped that he lived on the outskirts of town and had 6 acres of property. The court told my grandpa his auto repair shop is operating illegally. If my grandpa wants to continue, he's going to need to get a business license, get the proper insurances, and if he does that, he will be good to go. Now, what do you think a man who has nothing but time and money in this situation is going to do? He's going to get his business license and insurances, of course, which he did, and that surprised no one, but he went further. He got a dedicated phone line that ran into his shop. He hired a full-time mechanic. He put up a professional sign, and he set up a little waiting area with the water cooler. What shocked everyone even more, he ran a local TV ad saying he was a pay-what-you-can mechanic shop, reservations only. He put ads in the local paper saying the same thing. Yes, folks, that's right. My grandpa is not only a licensed legal auto repair business, He has a certified mechanic on his payroll, and he's running ads. As for his prices, they were quite simple. You either bring the parts yourself and pay the mechanic whatever you wanted. The mechanic got a separate wage for my grandpa, so if you couldn't pay anything, that was fine. My dad was concerned with the fact that my grandpa was paying a mechanic a full-time wage, yet not bringing in any revenue to even offset the mechanic's cost. My grandpa said, "Son, I could write that man, the mechanic, a check right now, so large he could live comfortably for the rest of his life and never work again. So don't worry about what I'm paying him." Had my grandpa sourced the parts, he'd charge you for the parts and you'd pay the mechanic whatever you want. My grandpa started taking jobs, and boy, did that shop get busy. It was impossible to beat Grandpa's prices. Grandpa was essentially paying to fix your car for you. My grandpa would spend his days with the mechanic that he had hired working on cars. He loved it. The owner of the local car dealership was furious. He sued my grandpa again. They went to court, and the judge basically said my grandpa owned a licensed, insured auto repair business. What he charges his customers for his services is completely up to him, even if that means doing the work for free. About a year or so later, my grandpa gets a call from a lawyer who says he's representing a potential buyer of the local car dealership. However, the buyer wants to speak to my grandpa. My grandpa agreed. He sat down with the new potential buyer who expressed his concerns about buying the dealership. Service is a major profit center for a dealership, and he's considering buying the local dealership. However, he doesn't want to buy the dealership if my grandpa is going to keep operating the way he is, because it's impossible for a for-profit business to compete against someone selling their services for free. My grandpa agreed that there's no way someone looking to make a profitable business could ever compete against him, so they came to an agreement. The owner buys the dealership, and my grandpa would only work on a few cars a week, maybe 5 or 6, only work on people's cars who are down on their luck and probably too poor to be able to pay a professional dealership to fix their car. Any parts he needs, he will buy from the dealership. Any work he declined, he'd refer to the dealership. The new owner of the dealership agreed to let my grandpa be and stay out of his way, and the dealership hired his mechanic. They shook hands, the local dealership was bought out, and for the next 9 years, my grandpa would fix people's cars who were down on their luck. If he had to buy parts, he'd buy from the dealership. And as for that mechanic my grandpa hired, he ended up becoming the service manager and did quite well for himself. I don't know what the dealership was sold for. However, my grandpa said right after the sit-down with the new owner immediately purchased the dealership. I'm sure the new owner got a deal because of my grandpa. As for my grandpa, when he was 80, he had a heart attack in his shop. Luckily, one of his grandkids was there, and they got him to the hospital, and he made a full recovery. But the doctor told him his body couldn't handle working in that garage anymore. He ended up shutting down after that. For the next 3 years, he looked out of his kitchen window, staring at his shop, remembering all the fun he had had in his garage. My grandpa passed away at 83, surrounded by his friends and family. This is John from /Bash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, now is the time to think about subscribing. I would love you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one.